Hey there, Metcalf here. This week's video is a top 10 list of great tenor saxophone players. It's a follow-up to the video I did a couple weeks ago, the top 10 great alto saxophone players. In that list, I narrowed things down to musicians who were active before 1960, and I've done the same with this one. You'll notice that there are a lot of Black American musicians in these lists, and one thing that Black Americans working before 1960 all had in common was the experience of overt racism on a daily basis. The study of music in any style is simultaneously a study of history, and the same goes for literature or film or painting, really any art form, because art is telling the history of humanity. On this channel, we focus on the saxophone, music played by the saxophone, and the musicians who play the saxophone. During the lives of all of these musicians, racial segregation and unequal treatment were not only tolerated, but part of the law in America. They are telling their story through their music, and a very large part of that story is the experience of being Black in America. All popular music styles from the 20th century onward are direct descendants of Black American music and would not exist today without that enormous cultural influence. The history of racism in America cannot be separated from the study of Black American music. It may be an uncomfortable truth to confront, but it cannot be ignored. What is truly remarkable is that this universally loved music was created under such dehumanizing conditions. It's at the same time deeply disturbing and yet powerfully inspirational. The struggle for equality and racial justice is far from over. Now more than ever, we need to be reminded of the eternal musical gift given to us by Black American culture. In order to be worthy of any cultural gift, we are obliged to pass it along in good faith to others while recognizing and duly respecting the original sources. I cannot teach this music without acknowledging racism past and present any more than you can learn it. So if you enjoy Black American music, yet still don't understand what all the fuss is about, I encourage you to keep listening. I have faith that the message of peace, freedom, love, unity, beauty will eventually get through and help make the world a better place. That's why I'm making these lists. It's not a ranking, it's just a way to pay tribute to and raise awareness of 10 influential artists among countless others. And I'm counting on you guys to let me know in the comments below who else could have or should have been in my list so that I could perhaps include them in a future video. So, in no particular order other than a loosely chronological one, let's start with Coleman Hawkins. Coleman Hawkins is known as the first prominent tenor saxophone player, and his playing has had a significant influence on just about every tenor saxophone player that came after him. Let's check out this video of him playing with Charlie Parker. His sound on a ballad like this can be characterized as having a lot of subtone in the lower register, a breathy attack, a fast and wide vibrato, which is almost ever present. Check out the 1939 recording of Body and Soul by Coleman Hawkins. It's considered one of the most important recordings in all of jazz. That's a lick you'll hear a lot throughout the history of jazz improvising. Hawk also could play with a loud, brash, in-your-face sound the influence of which can be heard on rock and roll and R&B saxophone playing ever since. It's important to point out here that they're miming. The music you're hearing was pre-recorded, and in this video, they're pretending to play. Check out this clip where Bird gets Coleman Hawkins to laugh. It wasn't included in the final version of this film.
Until the studio manager told him otherwise.
Oops, sorry.
With the 1940s giving way.
There's a limited number of clips available from this time. This video is from 1950. The videos I'm using to demonstrate aren't always the best musical examples, but I love being able to see these musicians play, see the equipment they're using, look at their embouchure. It looks like Hawkins is playing on a Berg Larsen mouthpiece and a Selmer balanced action saxophone. Another hugely influential early tenor sax pioneer was Lester Young. He was a prominent member of the Count Basie band, and his style was more laid back and relaxed than that of Coleman Hawkins. Not only can his influence be heard in the cool school of jazz playing popularized by people like Stan Getz, Zoot Sims, Jerry Mulligan, he is also credited with being the originator of some of the hipster lingo we still use today. The term cool itself, Lester Young. His recordings with Billie Holiday and Teddy Wilson are a good place to hear him at his best. This clip is from 1958, 6 months before he died at the age of 49. It's interesting to hear this section where he trades fours with Coleman Hawkins. Obviously not the ideal circumstances in which to compare their differing styles, but an interesting historical moment nonetheless. Ben Webster is one of the most expressive players on the tenor saxophone in the same way as Johnny Hodges was on the alto saxophone. While many saxophone players will use higher note densities to build tension, Ben Webster will do the opposite and try to say more with less. Once again, this is 1972, near the end of his life. Another auto-link mouthpiece. He played in the Duke Ellington Band as well, did some small group work with Johnny Hodges. Like many other black musicians, he moved to Europe, where there was significantly less racism and more appreciation for the art form. But this move usually came at a great expense to their careers. Illinois Jacquet is the most prominently known of the Texas tenors, a group of tenor saxophone players hailing from Texas, known for a sound and style that would go on to be the signature of R&B and rock and roll saxophone solos. Loud and raucous, like a late night party. Let's listen to Illinois Jacquet play a solo on a very slow blues from a 1973 concert in Paris. Man, he uses space. He's got all day. wait. The growl is a typical characteristic of this Texas tenor sound. I replicate that by doing a low hum deep in my throat, almost in my chest, while I'm playing a note. Make sure you're using enough air when you do that. Speaking of saxophone players who moved to Europe, Dexter Gordon is probably the best known example, and one who managed to continue to contribute to the art form from both sides of the Atlantic with multiple recordings. He also managed to make a comeback to the United States after a 14-year hiatus, much of which was spent in Copenhagen, Denmark. I just want to make a quick shout out to Denmark. Thanks for supporting the art form over all of these decades. You would not believe how much of the footage comes from Denmark. Dexter is probably my personal favorite tenor saxophone player. For me, he defines the classic jazz genre. He was fluent in bebop at all tempos, but was also a master of playing ballads. His improvisation style was technical and playful at the same time. His sound was big and fat and served as the example for countless tenor saxophone players that came after him. Dexter Gordon ticks all the boxes of sound, style, language, and technique. Adds a false fingering for C. That's something Dexter would do all the time. He plays C, but to get a different timbre for each one, he's doing this false fingering thing. So in this case, he's just playing C and adding the G key. Not only was Dexter Gordon a killer player, he was one stylish dude. This photo right here epitomizes what jazz looks like to most of the world. That is the cool Lester Young was talking about. The album Go by Dexter Gordon is a must listen. Gene Amos is another great tenor saxophone player who straddled the fence, so to speak, between the bebop style of playing and the blues and R&B style that was gaining popularity at the time. The influence of Lester Young can be heard in his sensitive and melodic playing, but so can the brash, in-your-face playing style of Coleman Hawkins. Mixed in with this is the bebop language of Charlie Parker. Part of the fun in going back and listening to all of these musicians in a historical context is trying to piece together all the different sources of musical influence and see how they came together to help create each individual's personal style. Unfortunately, we lost about 10 years of Gene Amos's prime music-making time because he was in prison for drug possession charges. And like so many other musicians of the time, he died very young at the age of 49. Sonny Rollins is undoubtedly one of the most influential improvisers of all time. His extensive recording catalog includes over 60 albums as a leader, and he appears on dozens of others as a sideman. While he was clearly influenced by Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, Charlie Parker, and others, he developed a truly unique style of improvising. The unaccompanied solo intro we're going to listen to is one of his trademarks, as is the piano-less trio. Another King Super 20. He has said that playing without the piano guiding the harmony allows him to be more free with his improvisations, and it certainly sounds like it. Check out the album Saxophone Colossus to get to know Sonny Rollins. This is from 1959. In Europe, of course. Hank Mobley is another one of my personal favorite tenor saxophone players. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a video of him playing, so let's listen to this audio of him playing live with Miles Davis's group in 1961. Hank Mobley epitomizes the sound and style of the hard bop tenor saxophone player. He plays with the language and chromaticism and harmony of bebop mixed with a laid-back sound and feel. The album Soul Station is required listening for all tenor sax players. Stan Getz is widely known for his bossa nova recordings, which were hugely successful, but his career started out playing in some of the most popular big bands of the time. He worked with Woody Herman, Benny Goodman, Stan Kenton. His tenor sound is on the lighter end of the spectrum, let's say, the so-called cool jazz tenor sound. Something like that. This clip is from 1960, recorded in Germany, and what's so great about it is he's on stage with John Coltrane, which is basically like the polar opposite stylistically at the time. It's great to listen to both of them playing to hear that contrast. Speaking of Coltrane, you didn't think I was going to leave him off the list, did you? Not only is John Coltrane one of the most influential tenor saxophonists of all time, he's one of the most influential musicians of all time. Let's listen to him playing on So What from the Miles Davis album Kind of Blue, which is one of the most influential jazz recordings of all time. Auto-link mouthpiece. This clip is from 1959, arguably jazz's best year when it comes to the output of new music. John Coltrane led the way towards a new way of playing and a new way of improvised expression. In addition to his work on Kind of Blue, check out Blue Train, one of his first albums as a leader. This list was very difficult to put together, mainly because there are so many great influential tenor saxophone players from this period, it was very hard to choose. Notably missing are Sonny Stitt, who I put in the alto video, but his tenor playing was so good he could have easily been in both. Also, Benny Golson, whose many compositions are part of our standard repertoire today. Joe Henderson, Wayne Shorter, Stanley Turrentine. Those guys I'm going to save for another video as second generation players. Here are just some of the names of musicians that could have easily been included in this list. Don't forget to let me know in the comments who you would have added and how you would have changed this list. I hope all musicians, listeners, and fans of this music will keep in mind the circumstances in which much of it was composed, recorded, and performed. The legacy of racism is still with us today. It hasn't gone away as much as some people would like to think that it has. Here's hoping that 2020 is a year future generations look back on as a turning point.